A stranger let her kid destroy my $2,000 camera lens, so I tracked her down at the mall security desk. There is a distinct sinking feeling in your stomach when you hear the sound of expensive glass shattering on a hard tile floor. It is a sharp, crystalline crunch that instantly transports your mind directly to a bank account balance. I was sitting in a crowded mall cafe, enjoying a rare moment of peace with my laptop and my professional camera gear. I am a freelance photographer, and my equipment is not just a hobby. It is my livelihood, my mortgage payment, and my retirement fund. Across the room, a woman was loudly ignoring her toddler, who was treating the seating area like an obstacle course. I kept my head down, hoping the chaos would pass. Then, a small, sticky hand slammed into my open camera bag. The sickening crunch echoed through the cafe. I looked up, expecting an apology. Instead, I got a master class in parental entitlement. The cafe was located on the ground floor of an upscale shopping center, known for its overpriced pastries and exposed brick walls. I chose it specifically because it was a Tuesday morning, meaning the usual rush of parents had not yet arrived. I ordered a black coffee, settled into a corner booth near the large glass windows, and carefully unpacked my equipment. As a freelance commercial photographer, my gear is my entire livelihood. Sitting on the table was my primary camera body, and resting inside an open, padded insert of my canvas messenger bag was my most prized possession: a professional-grade zoom lens. I had purchased it 3 months prior using an advance from a major corporate contract. It cost me exactly $2,000, allowing me to shoot high-end product photography. I treated it with reverence. My peaceful morning was interrupted when a woman and her toddler entered the cafe. The child looked to be about 3 years old, possessing the boundless, chaotic energy of a creature that had consumed far too much sugar. The mother, dressed in expensive athleisure wear, immediately sat at the table directly adjacent to mine. She did not engage with her child. Instead, she pulled out a smartphone, put in a pair of wireless earbuds, and began scrolling, entirely checked out of her physical surroundings. The toddler, left to his own devices, immediately began treating the cafe like a personal playground. He ran in tight circles around the tables, his light-up sneakers flashing with every heavy footfall. He bumped into chairs and emitted high-pitched shrieks that cut through the gentle hum of indie folk music playing from the overhead speakers. I kept my eyes fixed on my laptop screen, silently praying the mother would eventually intervene. I am not naturally confrontational. I prefer to avoid conflict, especially in public spaces where strangers tend to judge the person causing a scene just as harshly as the person ignoring it. I adjusted my posture, angling my body slightly to shield my camera bag from the toddler's erratic path. For 10 minutes, this strategy worked. The child ran toward the pastry counter, returned, and began spinning near the condiment station. I let out a slow, quiet breath, assuming the worst of the morning was behind me. Then, the toddler changed direction. He spotted the bright red strap of my messenger bag dangling off the edge of the booth. He let out a delighted laugh and lunged forward. His small, sticky hands grabbed the canvas strap and yanked it downward with surprising force. The bag slipped off the seat and hit the hard ceramic tile floor with a heavy thud. The canvas was durable, but the padded insert inside had not been secured with its Velcro flap. The $2,000 lens slid out of the foam casing, tumbled across the slick floor, and slammed directly into the base of the adjacent wooden chair. The sound was unmistakable. It was not a dull thud, but a sharp, sickening crack of precision optics giving way. I dropped my coffee mug, not caring that it shattered and splashed hot liquid across my shoes. I dropped to my knees, my hands hovering over the lens. The front glass element, a complex assembly of fluorite and extra-low dispersion elements, was shattered into a spiderweb of jagged shards. The autofocus motor housing was dented inward, and a fine dust of pulverized glass coated the matte black metal barrel. My stomach plummeted into a bottomless abyss. That lens was the down payment on my future house. I looked up, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting to see a horrified mother rushing over to apologize. Instead, the woman was still sitting in her booth, one earbud still in, looking at me with mild annoyance. She pulled the earbud out and sighed, a long, exaggerated exhalation of pure condescension. "You really shouldn't leave your things hanging off the seat like that," she said, her voice carrying easily across the quiet cafe. "He's just a toddler. He doesn't know any better. You need to be more careful with your stuff." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity of her statement. I carefully picked up the broken lens, the sharp edges of the glass biting into my fingertips. "He just knocked my camera equipment off the table and smashed it," I said, keeping my voice as level as possible. "This lens cost $2,000. You need to pay for the damage." She let out a short, dismissive laugh, shaking her head as if I were the unreasonable one. "Oh, please, don't try to scam me. It's a camera. They make them cheap at the electronics store. Besides, If it was so important, you should have held it in your lap. Kids will be kids. She stood up, grabbing her oversized designer tote and her phone. She whistled sharply at her son, who was now trying to climb the pastry display case. Come on, Brayden, we're leaving. This place is too crowded anyway. She grabbed the boy by the wrist, ignoring his protests, and marched toward the exit. She didn't look back. She didn't offer to exchange insurance information. She simply walked out the glass doors, leaving me kneeling in a puddle of spilled coffee and shattered optics. I sat back on my heels, the adrenaline slowly giving way to a cold, hard clarity. I looked up at the ceiling. In the corner, directly above the condiment station, was a high-definition security camera. Its red recording light was blinking steadily. The angle was perfect. It captured the entire interaction, from the moment the child grabbed the bag to the mother's dismissive comments. I pulled out my phone and snapped several photos of the broken lens, the spilled coffee, and the camera itself. I packed my ruined equipment back into the bag, wiped the coffee from my shoes with a stack of napkins, and walked to the counter. I asked the barista to preserve the security footage, explaining I was filing an insurance claim for property damage. She nodded sympathetically and told me the store manager would pull the clip for me in a few minutes. I stepped out of the cafe and onto the main mall concourse. The morning rush had officially begun. The wide walkways were packed with shoppers. I scanned the sea of faces, looking for the distinctive neon green athleisure jacket the mother had been wearing. Then I saw her. She was about 50 yards away, walking briskly toward the department store anchor on the north end of the mall, Brayden trailing behind her. She was completely unbothered, likely assuming she had successfully dodged the consequences of her child's destruction. I adjusted the strap of my heavy bag on my shoulder, my jaw tightening. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a $2,000 lesson in parental negligence. I turned on my heel and walked back into the cafe. The barista, whose name tag read Chloe, was already wiping down the counter with a sympathetic grimace. I approached her quietly, keeping my voice low so as not to draw the attention of the other patrons who were now whispering about the shattered glass on the floor. I explained that I needed the security footage immediately, as the woman was actively trying to leave the premises. Chloe nodded, pulling a small tablet from beneath the register. She tapped the screen a few times, navigating to the back-end security system. Within 2 minutes, she had isolated the clip. I watched the playback one more time. The angle was pristine. It clearly showed the child grabbing the bag, the lens hitting the floor, and the mother's dismissive, waving gesture before she walked out. Chloe transferred the video file to my personal flash drive. I thanked her, left my number in case the corporate office needed a formal statement, and walked back out into the bustling concourse. The mall was a labyrinth of glass and polished marble, but tracking a woman in a neon green jacket with a loud, light-up shoe-wearing toddler was surprisingly easy. I kept a safe distance, moving with the flow of foot traffic. She had entered a high-end children's boutique, a store where a single pair of denim overalls cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I stood near the entrance, partially obscured by a mannequin display, and watched her. She was flipping through a rack of cashmere sweaters for toddlers, completely ignoring Brayden, who was currently trying to peel the price tags off a display of plush teddy bears. The store associate was hovering nervously, clearly afraid to intervene. It was a perfect microcosm of her parenting style. Expensive aesthetics, zero actual engagement. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few discreet photos of her and the child, just to have physical proof of their current location. I had a choice to make. I could walk into the store, confront her in front of the staff, and risk a screaming match that would likely result in mall security ejecting both of us. Or I could use the system. I chose the system. I turned away from the boutique and walked briskly toward the security office located near the north entrance. The security office was a small, windowless room tucked behind a directory map. Inside sat Marcus, a retired police officer who worked mall security, and a younger guard named Davis. I walked in, placed my flash drive on the desk, and laid out the facts. I kept my tone professional, omitting the emotional frustration and focusing strictly on the financial and legal reality. I explained that a patron's child had destroyed $2,000 of professional equipment, and the parent had refused to exchange information, effectively committing a hit and run on my livelihood. Marcus, a man with a thick gray mustache and a weary demeanor, looked skeptical at first. People lied about broken items all the time, but when I plugged the flash drive into his monitor and played the video, his posture changed. He watched the child smash the lens, then watched the mother shrug and walk away. He paused the video on her face, zooming in to capture the clear image of her features. "She just left it broken and walked out?" Marcus asked, his voice a low rumble. "She told me to get over it," I replied. "And she's currently shopping in the children's boutique near the North Anchor." Marcus exchanged a look with Davis. $2,000 is well above the threshold for criminal mischief in this county, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. If she refuses to provide her information or arrange restitution, we can detain her for trespassing and hold her for the local police until they arrive to take a formal property damage report. He picked up his radio, keying the mic to dispatch a guard to the boutique's exit. We'll intercept her before she reaches the parking garage, he told me. Wait here. I followed Marcus and Davis out of the office, hanging back as they positioned themselves near the main thoroughfare that led to the parking structure. The tension in my chest was a tight, coiled spring. I checked my phone, reviewing the photos I had taken of the shattered lens. The financial hit was massive, but the principle of the matter was what kept my heart rate elevated. 10 minutes later, the mother emerged from the boutique. She was carrying 3 large shopping bags, looking entirely pleased with herself. Braden was trailing behind her, holding a massive stuffed animal and whining loudly about being hungry. She didn't even look down at him. She adjusted her sunglasses, checking her reflection in the glass of a storefront, completely unaware that she was walking directly into a trap of her own making. Marcus and Davis stepped forward, blocking the wide walkway. The mother stopped, her smile faltering as she took in the uniforms. I stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, standing right beside Marcus. The mother's eyes darted from the guards to me, and then down to the heavy canvas bag slung over my shoulder. The realization slowly dawned on her face, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to defensive hostility. She planted her feet, crossing her arms over her chest, and tilted her chin up, preparing for a fight. The mother's initial reaction was a practiced, dismissive scoff. She shifted her heavy shopping bags to her other arm, adjusting her designer sunglasses, even though we were indoors under fluorescent lights. Is this a joke? She asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Because if you're trying to shake me down, I'm calling corporate security myself. Marcus didn't flinch. He stood with his hands resting casually near his belt, his posture relaxed but entirely immovable. Ma'am, I am the head of security for this property. We have you on high-definition video destroying $2,000 of professional equipment and refusing to provide your information. We are simply asking for your identification to facilitate a civil resolution before we involve local law enforcement. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed slightly in the wide concourse. Law enforcement? For a camera? You're out of your mind. Move out of my way. She took a step forward, attempting to bypass the guards. Davis stepped smoothly into her path, mirroring her movement to keep her blocked. Ma'am, please don't make this difficult. If you walk away without resolving this, we will detain you for criminal mischief and hold you until the police arrive to take a formal report. The color drained slightly from her face, but her pride was a formidable fortress. She looked around, realizing that a small crowd of shoppers had paused to watch the exchange. She lowered her voice, leaning in with a venomous hiss. You people are insane. It was an accident. My son is 3 years old. He doesn't know the value of your little toys. I am not paying you a single cent. I stepped forward, unzipping the main compartment of my canvas bag. I pulled out the shattered lens and held it out to her. It's not a toy, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. The front element is shattered, and the autofocus motor is cracked. The replacement cost is exactly $2,000. If you refuse to pay, I will file a police report, and your son's accident will become a permanent part of your legal record. She didn't take the lens. She looked at it as if it were radioactive. I'm not touching that, she snapped, and I'm not paying for it. You should have put it away. Marcus pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 1 at the North Concourse. I need local PD to respond for a property damage dispute. We have a subject refusing to provide identification. The mention of the police finally cracked her facade. The arrogant tilt of her chin dropped. She looked at Marcus, then at Davis, and finally at me, her eyes wide with a sudden dawning panic. Wait, she said, her voice losing its sharp edge. You're actually going to call the cops? Over a camera? Over $2,000 of stolen livelihood, I corrected her. You let your child destroy my property and then tried to walk away. That's not an accident anymore. That's theft by deception. For the next 15 minutes, we stood in the middle of the busy walkway while the crowd flowed around us. The mother paced in a tight circle, muttering under her breath, checking her phone, and occasionally shooting me a glare that could have melted glass. Braden, oblivious to the tension, sat on a nearby bench, happily chewing on the tag of his new stuffed animal. When the uniformed officer arrived, Marcus handed over his tablet and played the video. The officer watched it in silence, his expression unreadable. He looked at the broken lens in my hand, then looked at the mother. He didn't yell. He didn't lecture. He simply pulled out his notepad and began asking her for her full legal name and date of birth. Officer, please, she stammered, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her tote. It was just a misunderstanding. I didn't realize it was that expensive. I can't afford $2,000 right now. The officer paused his writing and looked up. Ma'am, if you cannot provide restitution today, I will have to take you into custody for criminal property damage. You will be booked, fingerprinted, and held until a judge sets your bail. Alternatively, if you can settle the civil claim right now, I will note it in my report and you can be on your way. The reality of the situation finally fully penetrated her entitlement. The thought of being handcuffed in front of her child, of having a criminal record, of explaining this to her family, broke through her delusions of invincibility. She slumped against the concrete pillar, pulling out her phone. "What's your Venmo or Zelle?" she asked, her voice hollow. I pulled up my app and showed her the QR code. She scanned it with shaking hands. A moment later, my phone chimed. The notification confirmed the transfer of $2,000. I showed the screen to the officer, who nodded and closed his notepad. "Civil matter resolved," the officer said. "Ma'am, I strongly suggest you keep a closer eye on your child in the future. Have a good day." The officer walked away. The mother didn't say a word to me. She didn't apologize. She just grabbed her son's hand, her knuckles white, and walked briskly toward the parking garage, her head down. I stood there for a moment, listening to the ambient noise of the mall. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion. I had my money, but the experience had left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't just about the lens. It was about the sheer, unadulterated audacity of people who believe the rules of basic human decency simply do not apply to them. The next morning, I took the broken lens to my repair shop. The technician confirmed it was completely unfixable, but the $2,000 covered a brand new replacement. As I walked out of the shop with the fresh, pristine glass, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had spent the entire ordeal trying to remain calm, trying to be the reasonable adult in a situation designed to provoke me. I learned a valuable lesson that day. Being reasonable doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes the most reasonable thing you can do is hold people entirely accountable for the messes they make, no matter how small they claim those messes are. I packed the new lens into my bag, secured the Velcro flap, and walked out into the sunlight, ready for my next shoot.